The Metropolitan Police have issued fines to 20 people over lockdown parties in Downing Street. This is just the first tranche of fines, presumably for the most open and shut cases. And we're yet to find out whether Boris Johnson will receive one. But whether or not the PM does receive a fine, that any have been issued at all should cause him headaches. That's because it would appear they contradict a number of statements Johnson previously made to Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that all guidance was followed completely during number 10. But I repeat, Mr. Speaker, that I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what I have been repeatedly assured.
It is against the ministerial code to lie to Parliament, and breaking the ministerial code is a resignation offence. But Dominic Raab suggested that 20 fines do not imply Johnson had been dishonest.
The Prime Minister was updating Parliament to the best of his knowledge and his understanding. Of course, there were, and that's very different. So if he said something which turned out not to be true, because we now know that there have been 20 fixed penalty notices, I mean, we accepted that there were all sorts of claims and allegations that needed to be independently investigated. That's why Sue Gray conducted the review. That's why the Met conducted their investigation. We embraced that. But I think it's something rather different to say that he lied, which suggests that he was deliberately misleading.
But we've seen, since he said those words, we've seen pictures of him at some of these gatherings. He knew he was there.
Sorry, you're conflating all sorts of things. And first of all, the PM has not to date been issued with a fixed penalty notice, and you're making sort of assertions that he was at parties where, in relation to photos, which I don't think demonstrate that. The point you asked me was about the ministerial code. I think it's one thing, clearly we had the investigations because of the claims and the assertions that were made, which were right to follow up, and it's clear there have been breaches of the law. But to jump from that to saying that the Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament rather than answering to the best of his ability, I'm afraid is just not right.
You'll note Dominic Raab there accepted that the law had been broken during Downing Street parties. That's obviously the case. The fines had been issued precisely because COVID laws were broken. But later in the day, Boris Johnson's spokesperson pushed back against the claim there had been criminality in Downing Street. Boris Johnson was asked about this stance, or his stance, at a meeting of the Commons Liaison Committee.
If you are serving with one of them, you're pretty much toast, aren't you? I mean, no Prime Minister could possibly survive being found of criminality for the very rules that that Prime Minister set. You'd be finished if you got one.
Well, with deepest respect to you, Pete, I don't in any way wish to minimise the importance of the issue and your point, but I just want to return to what I've said, and that is that that would come under the category of running commentary, in my view.
Getting away from running commentary, you can at least accept that there has been criminality committed. Apparently your spokespersons just contradicted the assertions made by the Justice Secretary, your deputy, this morning, that there has been criminality. You do accept that criminality has been 20 fixed penalty notices have been issued, for goodness sake. There can't be any contradiction in doubt that criminality.
So I hope, very frank with the House about where I think we've gone wrong, and the things that I regret, that I apologise for. But there is an ongoing investigation, and I understand the point you're making, Pete. But I'm going to camp pretty firmly on my position.
I mean, very much the words that you use, I've tried to be as clear as I can, and I think that's the big concern that people have, is that you're not able to be clear or straight on these issues if you can't even answer the question as to whether any laws were broken in Whitehall during lockdown when 20 fixed penalty notices were issued yesterday. Can you at least give a clear answer on that?
Well, you say 20 fixed penalty notices were issued yesterday. I'm not certain of that, but you may know something that I don't.
What? You may know something I don't. I assume what he's referring to is, the news yesterday was the police say they are to fine 20 people. It's not entirely clear if that happened yesterday or today, but that's completely besides the point. 20 people either have got fines or are getting fines because they broke the law in Downing Street. That's the only reason you can get one of those fines. If you think you didn't break the law, you can refuse to pay them, you can dispute them, you can go to court, and I presume these people would lose and it would be incredibly embarrassing. But the fact they have accepted the fines means they have accepted they broke the law. There is no ambiguity. You cannot say, I'm not going to comment on this because an investigation is ongoing. This is just a simple fact. This is basic legal 101. If you get given a fine for breaking the law, you have broken the law.
This is the thing about law and order politics, right? Because let's not forget, Boris Johnson is a politician who has made his career off the basis of this law and order reputation. He's making speeches in front of rows of cops or being pro more policing at the border, etc. Clearly, as we can see here, law and order is not this neutral tool of justice that is applied equally. It never has. It never will be. And in Tory Britain in particular, it's law and order for the poor and it's anything goes for the rich and powerful. And that's what we're seeing unfold in this situation. On a daily basis in this country, Black people are stopped and searched in the street for no reason other than they look suspicious or they might have something on them. A few weeks ago, a young Black girl was strip searched at her school on the mere suspicion that she may have had weed on her. And not to mention as well that thousands and thousands of people, disproportionately Black men, are on a gangs matrix database on the basis that they haven't actually done anything, but are considered to be at risk of doing something that could be categorized as gang violence. And obviously what gets categorized as gang violence is in itself very racialized and very deliberate. Thousands of people, predominantly of Muslim backgrounds, have been referred to prevent on the basis that they are suspected of possibly being at risk of being radicalized. So it is absolutely normal in this country for people to be criminalized on the basis just purely of suspicion, to face more consequences than we are seeing here, purely on the basis and have serious impacts on their lives. On the mere basis that they may be at risk of doing something and not even having done anything. And yet at the very top of our political system, we have ministers that are so emboldened to break rules that are actually there for a reason. The rule to not have big gatherings in the middle of a pandemic, that's actually a law worth following, a rule worth following, because it could actually cause risk to people in that workplace or people outside of that workplace. They felt so emboldened to break that rule. They announced in emails that they were planning on having this party, that they were planning on breaking rules. They weren't afraid of leaving a paper trail. Police were present at the rule-breaking parties, not to stop them, but to actually protect them. And so after all that, not only have the Met Police been reluctant to actually do anything, reluctant to actually, name the names of the people who have been fined, they were even reluctant to investigate. Not only has the Prime Minister lied in Parliament and to the people about the rule breaking without any consequence to that lying, but even once they have been caught red-handed, even once it is now undoubtable, we know what happened. They can't, squirm out of it with their, classics education and their big English words. They are still able to evade accountability. They can still stand up and weasel their way out, as we've seen with this performance from Boris Johnson, and weasel their way out of the significance of what has taken place. And so what that tells me is that not only has Boris Johnson not learned a thing, not only has this done nothing to actually challenge the relationships of power that have led to this problem, the understanding that the power of the Prime Minister, the power of politicians is an unaccountable power. The establishment as a whole has not been forced to change its ways as a result of what has happened, as a result of this scandal that meant so much to the British people, and I'm sure continues to mean so much to the people that elected this party into power. And so there is still this very clear understanding amongst the powerful that policing and law and order politics and state punishment is there as a tool that they can use to discipline working class people. It is not something that they, as rich and powerful people, are remotely scared of, because they quite rightly, quite correctly, don't see it as something that applies to them. So that's what I get from this story, is that the whole fallacy of law and order is really just a code word for we are willing to brutalize and criminalize and lay down this tool of oppression against working class people, against Black people, against Muslim people. But we are absolutely enshrined from that, sheltered from that ourselves, us and our bodies. We see the law and order as something that protects us from working class people rather than something that protects working class people from us.
Let's talk about the Tories more generally. They didn't seem too worried about law breaking at Downing Street. On the same day that the Met revealed that 20 fines would be issued, they gathered in the ballroom of a plush hotel near Westminster Bridge for a party. It was hosted by Boris Johnson to soften up his MPs, and ITV was there to talk to Tories in attendance. You'll also see a protest by families of people killed by COVID.
Is this party going to help you forget all the others that happened in Downing Street?
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun, I know that, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And, it was great. We had a photo taken. It was absolutely super.
So you're having a jolly old time?
Well, it's occasionally nice, once every 2 or 3 years, to get together.
Mr. Bridgen,
yes.
Is dinner and drinks going to buy your loyalty tonight?
No, but the international security situation will.
Mr. Duncan Smith, are you ready to forgive and forget the parties in number 10?
Well, I don't think it's got to do with the dinner.
What are you hoping to hear from the PM?
Good stuff, as he normally does.
What in particular to try and repair morale after Partygate?
Morale's pretty good, actually.
Why?
Ian Duncan Smith, is this a happy party?
Off to another party, are we?
Is this party going to help you forget all the other parties in number 10, Mr. Mandel?
It's not a party, it's colleagues getting together.
There's wine, isn't there? And there's dinner. It sounds like a party.
It's colleagues getting together for an opportunity to bond with colleagues that we haven't seen for 2 years.
It's hard to tell whether David Mundell is being ironic at the end there. It's not a party, it's colleagues getting together. He said that when he was walking past protesters who had family members bereaved by COVID-19. Like, you really couldn't make it up how incredibly tasteless these people are willing to be. According to Politico as well, amongst the attendees at the bash were MPs who only a month ago were calling for Boris Johnson to resign. I cannot really see in any universe these spineless muppets toppling their prime minister, even if he is personally fined.
God, what does it say about the integrity of those backbench MPs that they can be so easily swooned and persuaded by just a couple of bottles of wine and a nice dinner? I mean, I'm almost glad they're so weak because I rarely agree with their political positions, but it's quite pathetic to watch. But when it comes to whether or not we are stuck with Boris Johnson, we are. But more importantly, we are, it seems, stuck with the system that produced him, so long as we just continue to see this as just a moral failing that is particular to Johnson. Johnson is Teflon, but he's not Teflon because of some kind of innate, unprecedented political savviness or smart. He's Teflon because he has the protection of multiple institutions and coalitions that are more powerful than him and are more powerful than his detractors, most importantly. Johnson is obviously a particularly, I think, obnoxious character, but the meat of this story, the lack of accountability, the lack of justice for those people that were protesting, in particular outside of that very party, that will continue. That's what we are stuck with, so long as, the way that power is distributed in this country continues. Because ultimately, as you said, those fines are just a slap on the wrist. And justice itself, when you think about what justice would mean in this particular context, it's not just about punishment. It's not just about, okay, here's a fine or here's a condemnation or here's a consequence. Justice is about reckoning. It's about genuine accountability, and it's about change. That's actually the core part of justice. It's about the sincere recognition that harm was created by something that you did. And in this case, there's the literal harm of having a gathering in the middle of a pandemic. But there's also the damage, the more long-term term damage that has been done, possibly irreversibly, or at least for quite a long time, which is the damage to the integrity of public health messaging. That's a catastrophe, considering that we are still in a pandemic. It's not at the intensity, but there are still the average there was an average of 20,000 hospitalizations due to COVID in the past week. Cases are going up. So an actual recognition of that harm has clearly not in a meaningful way taken place. And we see that in the attitudes that were displayed by those MPs walking to that party, walking past the bereaved families of people who had died because of COVID. But justice, again, also most crucially involves a commitment to change so that those harms are not done again. And that's actually what is most important here. And for me, watching the ways in which the Tory party have closed ranks around Johnson, are repeating the lines that sort of absolve him and absolve the people who did this, and the fact that we've not got any concrete power in the relationship between politicians and media, that meant that these parties happened and we didn't know about it, that the press was laughing along with Allegra Stratton about these parties taking place in the middle of lockdown, the relationship between the police and politicians, which is why these parties were allowed to happen in the first place under the eyes of the Metropolitan Police. And also the fact that we still live in a society where a tiny group of people have a level of power that seems to have no ceiling. It seems to have no limit. And so that's why justice has not been done. That's why we are stuck with Johnson, and we are stuck with whoever the next Johnson will be and the Johnson after that will be. So that's really, for me, the key thing that we see, not just in that clip, but in the easy way with which we have forgotten the gravity of what actually took place when Johnson not only oversaw a party that allowed these things to happen, but also the fact that he told barefaced lies about it and was able to completely evade any kind of consequence, let alone actually being forced to change in light of those consequences.
I'm just pondering a bit more that comment from IDS, Ian Duncan Smith, when he said, our spirits are quite high, actually. And obviously that's very tasteless because he was walking past people who had families bereaved from COVID on the same day that 20 people had got a fine for breaking COVID laws. But also you've got to think, what has changed between the time when spirits on the Conservative benches were very low and now when they're very high? So they were very, very low in January when all of this PartyGate stuff was coming out. I can't think of anything domestic that's happened since then that would make them particularly pleased, would raise their spirits. We've got a cost of living crisis and their chancellor, his spring statement has gone down like a cup of cold sick. So the only thing that I think could have changed their spirits between January and now is the beginning of a brutal war on Ukraine. So the Tories are like, oh God, thank God this horrible war has come along because it started to make our Prime Minister look a bit more prime ministerial. Their spirits are very high. So the one upside of the brutal war in Ukraine, with cities getting demolished, is that now MPs in the Conservative Party feel a bit more sprightly than they did in January. It's pretty sickening to watch.